The hollow echo of Marcus Hale's footsteps reverberated through the dimly lit corridor of Silent Zone 7. The air hung heavy with the scent of rusted metal and stale recycled oxygen, a constant reminder of life after the interplanetary war. Yellow emergency lights cast long shadows against the walls as he made his way toward the eastern transformer station. Winter 2127 had arrived with unforgiving coldness. Even the heating system struggled to keep pace with the biting chill that seeped through the settlement's hastily constructed metal walls. The festival of renewal was only days away, but Marcus found little reason to celebrate. 3 years had passed since he'd lost his wife and son in the terrorist attack, yet the wound remained as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. System check on Sector E12, transformer station responding at 68% capacity. Marcus muttered into his wrist communicator, his voice flat and mechanical. As the maintenance engineer responsible for keeping Silent Zone 7's power grid operational, he took his duties seriously. It was all he had left. The communicator crackled in response. Copy that, Marcus. Anything above 65 is acceptable during peak hours. Proceed to next checkpoint. He sighed, adjusting the tool belt around his waist. The weight of his repair kit, filled with circuit testers, nanowire spools, and plasma welders, had become as familiar as the weight of his grief. Both were constants in his existence now. As he turned toward the abandoned medical wing to check the auxiliary power units, a faint sound stopped him in his tracks. In the otherwise silent corridor, it stood out like a beacon, a soft, muffled sob. Marcus frowned. The medical wing had been decommissioned months ago when the newer facility opened on the west side. No one should be here. His hand instinctively moved to the small stunner at his hip, a precaution against the occasional looter or desperate refugee. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing through the empty hallway. "This is Zone Security. Identify yourself." The sobbing stopped abruptly. Silence fell, heavier than before. With cautious steps, Marcus followed the direction of the sound, past abandoned examination rooms and emptied supply closets. A trail of small, wet footprints led him to a storage alcove, partially hidden behind a fallen ceiling panel. His wrist light illuminated the darkness, revealing a small, huddled figure pressed against the wall. A child, no more than 8 years old, with wide, terrified eyes that reflected the beam of his light. But it wasn't just any child. The luminescent blue tint of her skin and the slightly elongated shape of her eyes marked her unmistakably as Lunari, one of the alien refugees from Tenera. Her small hands clutched a tattered blanket as she stared up at him, trembling. Marcus froze. Housing unregistered aliens was a severe offense. The alien control unit wouldn't hesitate to arrest anyone harboring off-world species without proper documentation, especially Lunari. After the war, they were viewed with particular suspicion. "How did you get in here?" he asked, his voice softer now, lowering his light to avoid blinding the child. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she pressed herself further into the corner, her eyes never leaving his face. Marcus noticed her arm. A deep gash ran across her forearm, exposing a metallic sheen beneath the blue skin where Lunari blood vessels would typically be. Something in her frightened gaze struck a chord deep within him. For a brief moment, he saw his son's face superimposed over hers. The same fear, the same vulnerability. "I'm not going to hurt you," Marcus said, crouching down to her level and setting his tools aside. "You're injured. Let me see." The girl hesitated, then slowly extended her wounded arm. As Marcus reached for his medkit, she finally spoke, her voice small, but clear in the silence. "Will you be my father?" The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Memories of his son crashed over him. Birthday celebrations, bedtime stories, promises of protection that he'd failed to keep. The grief he'd kept at bay through routine and isolation threatened to overwhelm him. "What?" he managed, barely a whisper. "My father said, Find someone with kind eyes, the girl continued, her accented voice struggling with the human language. He said, when the ship fell, find someone to be new father. Marcus glanced over his shoulder at the empty corridor. He should report this. Protocol demanded it. An unregistered Lunari child in a human settlement was a security risk according to every regulation in place. But those eyes, filled with hope and desperation, held him in place. The rational part of his mind listed all the reasons to walk away, the legal consequences, the danger, the reminder of everything he'd lost. But another part, a part he thought had died with his family, stirred to life. "What's your name?" he asked instead.
"Ira," she whispered, "but Father said, new name for new world."
Marcus nodded slowly, making his decision. "Then I'll call you Nera. It means hope in my mother's language." He reached out his hand to her. "Come with me, Nera. It's not safe here." As her small blue fingers curled around his, Marcus knew he was crossing a line from which there was no return. "Will you be my father?" she asked again. Her eyes locked on his face. Marcus swallowed hard. "I won't abandon you," he promised. It wasn't exactly an answer, but it was all he could offer in that moment. He didn't know it then, but those words would set in motion a chain of events that would either heal his broken heart or destroy what little remained of his life. Dawn seeped through the narrow ventilation slits of Marcus's subterranean quarters, casting thin blades of light across the concrete floor. He'd spent the night setting up a makeshift bed for Nera in the storage compartment behind his living area, a space normally used for his maintenance equipment. The child had fallen asleep almost immediately, exhaustion overcoming fear. Marcus had stayed awake, vigilant, his mind racing with questions and plans. Now, as he prepared a bowl of synthetic nutrient soup, the standard ration for zone workers, he heard the soft padding of feet behind him. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "Are you hungry?" Nera approached cautiously, her movements deliberate as if conserving energy. The nutrition packet he'd placed on the small metal table seemed to catch her attention. "This is food?" she asked, examining the gray substance with apprehension. "It's not great, but it'll keep you strong," Marcus replied, pushing the bowl toward her. "We can't be picky in the zones." As she hesitantly spooned the substance into her mouth, Marcus studied her in the dim light. The gash on her arm had begun to heal remarkably quickly, a trait of Lunari physiology he'd heard about but never witnessed. Her skin's blue luminescence seemed slightly dimmer than the previous night, which concerned him. "How did you end up in the medical wing?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. Nera finished her spoonful before answering. "Ship crashed 3 cycles ago. Father put me in escape pod before the fire." Her voice faltered. "Pod landed near big machines. I hid, walked when dark, found the quiet place with medical symbols." Marcus nodded. She must have landed near the power grid and made her way to the abandoned medical wing, recognizing the universal medical emblem. "And your father? Was he Professor Yolan?" Nera's eyes widened in surprise. "You know Father?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "Professor Yolan was well known on Earth before the war. He helped design our energy restoration devices." He didn't mention that Yolan's name had later been vilified in propaganda, branded as a traitor to his own kind for working with humans. "Father said find safe place. Said humans would hurt me if they knew." Nera's hands trembled slightly as she set down her spoon. Before Marcus could respond, the ceiling-mounted communicator crackled to life with the daily zone announcements. "Attention all Zone 7 residents. The Alien Control Unit has detected unauthorized non-human biosignatures in Sector E. All residents are reminded that harboring unregistered extraterrestrial entities is punishable by immediate expulsion from zone protection. Reward offered for information leading to apprehension. End transmission." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. They were already searching. He quickly moved to the control panel by his door, activating the electromagnetic interference field he normally used to keep his private electronics from being detected by zone scanners. "Nera," he said, turning to the girl who had gone rigid with fear. "We need to be very careful now. You can't leave these rooms, and you must stay away from the windows and vents." "They will find me," she whispered, her luminescence dimming further in distress. "No, they won't," Marcus promised, though he wasn't certain he could keep it. "I'm going to protect you." For the first time since he'd found her, Nera's expression changed from fear to cautious hope. "Because you are my father now?" Marcus hesitated. He wasn't ready to claim that title. It belonged to a life that had been violently torn from him. Yet looking at this child, alone and hunted through no fault of her own, he couldn't bring himself to reject her either. "Because it's the right thing to do," he answered finally. It wasn't until he left for his maintenance shift, locking the quarters behind him, that Marcus fully comprehended the magnitude of his decision. By harboring this child, he was defying the very authority that provided his livelihood and security. If discovered, both their lives would be forfeit. But as he walked through the gray corridors toward his first assignment of the day, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years: purpose beyond mere survival. The zone's cacophony seemed louder that day. The persistent hum of power generators, the monotonous announcements over the public address system, the occasional clatter of transport vehicles. Marcus moved through his routine with mechanical precision, but his mind never strayed far from the child hidden in his quarters. At midday, he noticed the increased presence of ACU officers. Their distinctive black uniforms and visor helmets stood out among the drab clothing of zone residents. 2 officers were scanning the residential block adjacent to Marcus's building, their handheld bioscanners sweeping methodically across each dwelling. He needed to act quickly. The standard-issue scanners could detect non-human biological signatures through most barriers. The interference field in his quarters would mask some readings, but a dedicated sweep would eventually pick up Nera's presence. During his lunch break, Marcus diverted to the zone's black market, a collection of makeshift stalls hidden within the labyrinthine service tunnels. Here, for the right price, one could acquire items that official channels deemed restricted or unnecessary for refugee survival. "Jin." Marcus nodded to the wizened merchant whose stall was little more than a blanket, spread with electronic components. "Maintenance man," Jin replied with a gap-toothed smile. "Unusual to see you midday. Power grid finally give up?" "Looking for something specific," Marcus lowered his voice. "Biosignature dampeners. Military grade if possible." Jin's smile faded, his eyes narrowing. "Dangerous request. ACU been cracking down hard since they detected that alien signal. Why would a straight arrow like you need something like that?" "Damaged power node giving off false readings," Marcus lied smoothly. "Keeps triggering alerts. Rather fix it myself than have ACU crawling through my work area." Jin studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. "I might have something. Not cheap, though. Name your price." The transaction cost Marcus nearly a month's rations credits. But the small device Jin ultimately produced from beneath a hidden compartment was worth it. A neural pattern disruptor originally designed to hide soldiers from enemy bioscanners during the war. By the time his shift ended, Marcus had formulated a plan. He needed more information about Nera's situation and potential safe havens. There were rumors of an underground network that helped displaced aliens, the humanitarian underground. But contacting them would be nearly impossible under the zone's surveillance. When Marcus returned to his quarters, he found Nera exactly where he'd left her, huddled in the corner of the storage room. But something had changed. A soft blue glow emanated from her hands as she traced patterns in the air. "What are you doing?" he asked, setting down his tools. Nera startled, the glow instantly disappearing. "Practice Father's teaching," she answered timidly. "Bioluminescent control." Marcus approached, fascinated despite himself. "Can all Lunari do that?" She shook her head. Only science cast. Father taught me to hide it, but need practice to stay strong. Marcus sat beside her, removing the biosignature dampener from his pocket. This might help hide you from the scanners, but we'll need more than this for long-term safety. Nera's eyes fixed on the device, recognition flashing across her features. Father had similar device. Said it masked Lunari energy signature. Your father was preparing for something like this, Marcus realized. He knew the risks of sending you to Earth. The girl nodded solemnly. Said war coming. Said I carry important knowledge here. She tapped her temple. Said find safe person. Then find Sarah Prime. Sarah Prime? Marcus frowned. The independent colony. That's 3 systems away. Father said people there protect Lunari children. No hate there. Marcus considered this information. Sarah Prime was indeed known for its progressive stance on interspecies relations, maintaining neutrality during the Earth-Tenera conflict. If anywhere might offer sanctuary for a Lunari child, it would be there. But the journey would be nearly impossible. Civilian interplanetary travel was strictly regulated, with multiple checkpoints and bioscan protocols. Getting Nera off-planet would require resources and connections far beyond what Marcus possessed. As if sensing his thoughts, Nera placed her small hand on his arm. You will help me reach Sarah Prime. Marcus wanted to be honest. He wanted to explain the overwhelming odds against success, the danger they would face, the likelihood of capture, but the hope in her eyes stopped him. I'll try, he promised, knowing it might be a promise he couldn't keep. But first, we need to ensure your safety here while I figure things out. He activated the dampener, showing Nera how to wear it beneath her clothing. This will help mask your biosignature, but we need to be careful. The ACU has advanced detection methods. As night fell over Zone 7, Marcus made entries in his personal log, documenting his thoughts and observations. Day 1 with Nera. The child is clearly traumatized, but remarkably resilient. Her abilities with bioluminescence suggest advanced Lunari genetic traits, not typical of refugee children from Tenera. Professor Yolan must have sent her to Earth for a specific purpose. The question is, what knowledge does she carry that was worth such risk? And why is the ACU so determined to find one Lunari child? Tomorrow I'll attempt to contact Zara Kellen. If anyone has connections to the humanitarian underground, it's her. It's a risk. But we're running out of options. Nera asked again if I would be her father. I still don't have an answer. The memory of Elias is too raw, too present. Taking on that role feels like betrayal. Yet leaving her alone feels equally wrong. One day at a time, focus on keeping her safe first. Emotions can wait. Marcus closed the log and leaned back in his chair, exhaustion seeping into his bones. Through the thin wall, he could hear Nera's soft breathing as she slept. The sound triggered memories of nights spent beside his son's bed, listening to the same rhythmic pattern. In 3 years, he had carefully constructed walls around his grief, channeling all emotion into the mechanical precision of his work. One small alien child had begun to crack those walls in less than a day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. For tonight, however, they were safe. 2 broken souls finding temporary sanctuary in the shadows of a world that had little place for either of them. The next morning brought increased ACU activity throughout Zone 7. Patrols had doubled overnight, and residents were being randomly stopped for identification checks. The bioscanners had been upgraded. Marcus could tell from the distinctive humming frequency they emitted as officers swept them across crowds. During his morning maintenance rounds, Marcus deliberately routed himself past the zone's communication hub. Zara Kellen worked there as a network administrator, one of the few zone residents with legitimate access to external communication channels. Their acquaintance was casual at best, but Marcus had once repaired her quarters power grid when official maintenance had a 3-week backlog. She'd been grateful then. He hoped that gratitude might extend to helping now. As luck would have it, Zara was taking her break in the small courtyard outside the hub when Marcus passed by. With her dark hair pulled back in a severe knot and her zone-issued gray uniform, she looked like any other worker. Only the subtle heterochromatic coloring of her eyes, one brown, one amber, hinted at mixed heritage that she kept carefully concealed. "Power grid still holding up?" Marcus asked, approaching casually. Zara glanced up from her datapad. "Surprisingly well. Your patch job saved my sanity." She studied his face with shrewd assessment. "But something tells me you're not here about my power connections." Marcus lowered his voice, acutely aware of surveillance drones hovering at the courtyard perimeter. "I need information about transport options. Off-zone, possibly off-planet." Her expression didn't change, but her fingers stopped moving on the datapad. Dangerous topic these days, especially with ACU crawling everywhere. She stood, gathering her things. "Walk with me." They moved toward a maintenance access door, where the ambient noise of machinery would mask conversation from distant monitoring. "You've never struck me as someone interested in leaving," Zara said, once they were inside the narrow corridor. "What changed?" "I found someone who needs help," Marcus answered, deliberately vague. Zara's mismatched eyes narrowed. The unregistered biosignature they've been hunting. It wasn't a question. Marcus tensed, ready to deny it, but Zara shook her head slightly. "Don't bother lying. I've seen the scan parameters they're using. Lunari, pre-adolescent, specific genetic markers. This isn't a random sweep for unregistered aliens." She lowered her voice further. "They're hunting something specific." "She's just a child," Marcus replied, confirming Zara's suspicion without explicitly stating it. "A child with valuable information. Apparently." Zara sighed. "Look, I can't help directly. Communications are monitored too closely. But there's a woman named Lin Yen at the new medical facility. She has connections." "To the humanitarian underground?" Zara's expression shuddered. "I didn't say that. Just that she might know transport options." She turned to leave, then paused. "Be careful, Marcus. They're offering 5 years' worth of ration credits as a reward for information. People get desperate in the zones." Marcus nodded his thanks, watching as Zara disappeared back through the door. The mention of Lin Yen was unexpected. He knew her peripherally. She'd been a patient during his brief stint as a field medic before transitioning to maintenance. Now she worked as an emergency physician at the zone's medical facility. With a new direction, Marcus completed his shift, constantly aware of the ACU presence. By mid-afternoon, a new announcement echoed through the zone. "Attention all residents. ACU has confirmed the presence of an unregistered Lunari entity within zone boundaries. Harboring this entity is treason against Earth security protocol. All residents are required to submit to enhanced bioscan checkpoints, beginning at 1800 hours today." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Enhanced bioscans would detect not only Nera, but also the dampener he'd acquired. They needed to move quickly. When his shift ended, he took a circuitous route back to his quarters, ensuring he wasn't followed. Nera was practicing her bioluminescence control when he entered, creating small, floating spheres of blue light that dissipated at his arrival. "We need to relocate," Marcus said without preamble. "The ACU is implementing enhanced scans tonight." Fear flashed across Nera's features, but she nodded with surprising composure. "Where will we go?" "There's an old maintenance tunnel beneath this section. It connects to the water filtration system." Marcus began gathering essential supplies. It will be cold and damp, but the water interference should help mask any residual biosignature the dampener doesn't cover. As he packed a small bag with rations and medical supplies, Nera watched silently. Finally, she spoke. "You are risking much for me. Why?" The question caught Marcus off guard. Why indeed? 3 days ago, his life had been empty, but uncomplicated. Now he was risking everything for a child he barely knew, from a species his world was taught to fear. "Because no child deserves to be hunted," he answered finally. "Human or Lunari." Something in Nera's expression softened. "My father said humans capable of great cruelty, but also great compassion. Said finding right human more important than finding safe place." Before Marcus could respond, a sharp knock echoed from his door. They both froze. "Zone maintenance, random inspection," a voice called out, unfamiliar and official. Marcus motioned for Nera to hide in the storage compartment, then moved toward the door, forcing his expression into neutral disinterest. He opened it to find 2 ACU officers, their faces obscured by reflective visors. "Maintenance Engineer Hale?" the taller officer asked, consulting a datapad. "That's me," Marcus confirmed, blocking the entrance with his body. "What's this about? I'm not due for quarters inspection until next month." "New protocols," the officer replied. "We're checking all zone personnel quarters, starting with maintenance staff who have access to restricted areas." The second officer raised a bioscan device. "Standard procedure. Won't take but a minute." Marcus knew refusing would only raise suspicion. He stepped aside, heart pounding against his ribs. The dampener should work, but if they conducted a thorough search? The officers moved efficiently through the small living space, the bioscan device humming as it swept over surfaces. Marcus noticed it pause slightly when passing near the storage compartment, but the reading apparently remained within acceptable parameters. "Place is clear," the second officer announced, lowering the device. "Though you might want to check your environmental regulator, getting some unusual energy fluctuations." "Old equipment," Marcus shrugged. "Been meaning to requisition a replacement." The first officer made a notation on his datapad. "All zone personnel should report any unusual sightings or energy readings. The unregistered entity poses potential biohazard risks." "Understood," Marcus nodded, escorting them toward the door. As they reached the threshold, the bioscan device suddenly emitted a sharp beep. The officer frowned, adjusting settings. "Getting a strange reading now. Might be equipment malfunction." A moment of terrible silence stretched as the officer studied the device. Marcus tensed, calculating the distance to his stunner hidden in the workbench drawer. Then, mercifully, the zone-wide alarm system blared to life, red emergency lights pulsing along the corridors. "Power grid fluctuation in Sector G," announced the automated system. "All maintenance personnel report to stations." The officers hesitated. Then the leader nodded. "We'll continue inspections after the emergency is addressed. Report to your station. Engineer Hale." Marcus waited until they were gone before rushing to the storage compartment. Nera emerged, her skin glowing with an intensity he hadn't seen before. "Did you cause that power fluctuation?" he asked, astonished. Nera nodded solemnly. "Father taught emergency disruption. Use energy signature to create feedback loop in power systems." Her luminescence dimmed noticeably. "Uses much strength. Cannot do again soon." "You saved us," Marcus said, quickly gathering their prepared supplies. "But we can't stay here now. They'll return once the fluctuation is contained." Within minutes, they were moving through the narrow maintenance access shaft beneath Marcus's quarters. The passage was barely wide enough for an adult to crawl through, forcing Marcus to army crawl while pushing their supply pack ahead of him. Nera followed behind, her smaller size allowing easier movement. The tunnel eventually opened into a larger junction where several water filtration pipes converged. The space was damp and cold, filled with the constant white noise of flowing water. It wasn't comfortable, but it would provide temporary shelter. "We'll rest here tonight," Marcus decided, setting up a small portable heater from his emergency kit. "Tomorrow, I'll contact Lin Yen at the medical facility." As the tiny heater fought against the pervasive chill, Nera huddled close to Marcus, her natural bioluminescence providing soft illumination. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the rush of water through the pipes.
Father used to tell stories on cold nights,
Nera said suddenly, about stars and ancient lunari who sailed between them. Marcus smiled faintly. My son loved stories too, especially ones about space explorers and alien worlds. The words emerged before he could stop them, the first time he'd spoken of Elias aloud in years. Nera looked up at him, her large eyes reflecting the blue glow of her skin. You had a son? Marcus nodded, something tight constricting his chest.
His name was Elias. He was 7 when I lost him.
What happened to him? There was an attack, a bombing at his school. Marcus's voice grew hoarse. It was supposed to target a military installation nearby, but they miscalculated. 28 children died that day.
By Lunari?
Nera asked, her voice small. By extremists, Marcus corrected. They existed on both sides. People who believed the only solution was destruction of the other. Nera was quiet for a moment, processing this.
Is that why you helped me? Because of your son?
The question cut through Marcus's carefully constructed defenses. Was that it? Was he seeking redemption for failing to protect his own child by saving this one? I don't know, he admitted. Maybe partly, but also because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserve a chance to live without fear. Nera nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. She leaned against his side, her warmth a surprising comfort in the cold tunnel. Will you tell me a story? She asked. Like you told your son. Marcus hesitated, then began softly. Once, there was a brave explorer who traveled between the stars, searching for a place called home. As he spoke, weaving a tale of adventure and hope, Marcus felt something shift within him, a tiny crack in the wall of grief he'd built around his heart. It wasn't healing, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a path toward it. Above them, the zone continued its hunt, unaware that beneath its very foundations, a new kind of family was taking tentative root in the darkness. Dawn in the water filtration tunnels wasn't marked by sunlight, but by the changing rhythm of the pipes as the zone's morning water usage patterns began. Marcus awoke stiff and cold, his back protesting from the hard concrete floor. Beside him, Nera slept curled in a tight ball, her bioluminescence dimmed to a faint glow in slumber. He checked his communicator, relieved to find it still functioning despite the interference from the surrounding pipes. The zone alerts indicated the power fluctuation had been contained, but ACU patrols remained elevated. A new announcement caught his attention. All zone residents were required to report for mandatory bioscan registration by the end of the day. They're creating a baseline, Marcus muttered to himself. Anyone not registered will stand out immediately. This complicated matters significantly. Without proper registration, Nera wouldn't be able to move through any part of the zone, even with the dampener. They needed help more urgently than he'd anticipated. Marcus gently woke Nera and shared their rations, nutrient bars, and recycled water. As she ate, he outlined his plan. I need to report for my shift to avoid suspicion, but I'll use the opportunity to contact Lin Yen at the medical facility. You'll need to stay hidden here until I return. Nera nodded solemnly, but fear flickered in her eyes.
What if you don't come back?
The question hung between them, heavy with implication. It was a possibility neither wanted to acknowledge, but couldn't ignore. I will, Marcus promised. But if something happens... He removed a small emergency beacon from his toolkit. Press this button. It will emit a distress signal on the maintenance frequency. Zara Kellen might intercept it. Tell her I sent you. Nera took the beacon, her fingers curling around it tightly. Be careful. She stopped herself. Be careful. Marcus. He pretended not to notice her slip, though it stirred something unexpected within him. With final instructions to remain hidden and silent, Marcus navigated the service tunnels back to a maintenance access point near his assigned sector. Emerging into the main corridors of Zone 7, Marcus was immediately struck by the increased security presence. Drone patrols hovered at every intersection, and residents moved quickly with downcast eyes, eager to avoid unnecessary attention. He reported to the maintenance hub, logging in for his shift as if nothing were amiss. His supervisor, a gruff veteran named Garrow, barely glanced up from his station. "You're assigned to the medical facility today. They're having issues with their quarantine field generators." Garrow thrust a work order toward him. "Priority assignment from administration." Marcus accepted the assignment with carefully concealed relief. This provided the perfect legitimate excuse to seek out Lin Yen. The medical facility occupied a repurposed pre-war government building near the zone center. Unlike most zone structures, it boasted actual windows and solid construction rather than prefabricated units. Security was tighter here, with ACU officers stationed at every entrance. Marcus presented his work order and submitted to the standard bioscan before being admitted. The interior bustled with activity. Medical staff in white uniforms, patients waiting in designated areas, and the occasional drone floating overhead. He located the quarantine section on the facility's lower level and began the legitimate work of diagnosing the field generator issues. As he worked, he kept watch for Lin Yen, whom he recognized from his field medic days. An hour into the repairs, she appeared, clipboard in hand, examining inventory in the adjacent supply room. Marcus waited until the corridor was momentarily clear before approaching. "Dr. Yen," he said quietly, continuing to adjust components on the generator panel. "I need your help." Lin glanced up, recognition crossing her features. "Marcus Hale. It's been years since you worked medical." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of help?"
"Zara Kellen suggested you might have connections for transport options."
Understanding dawned in her expression, followed immediately by caution. She checked the corridor before responding. "My office. 10 minutes. Finish your work here first." Marcus nodded and returned to the generator. True to his professional standards, he completed the repairs properly before making his way to the office indicated on Lin's door tag. The small space was cluttered with medical texts and equipment, a stark contrast to the sterile corridors outside. Lin was waiting, her posture tense. "This is about the Lunari child they're hunting," she stated without preamble. Marcus hesitated only briefly before nodding. "She needs safe passage. To Sarah Prime, ultimately." Lin exhaled slowly. "You've gotten yourself into something dangerous, Marcus. This isn't just any Lunari child. The ACU's bioscan parameters are specifically targeting genetic markers associated with the scientific caste. Specifically, Professor Yolan's lineage." "She's his daughter," Marcus confirmed. "But why would that warrant such an extreme response? The war ended 3 years ago." "Because Yolan didn't just help design energy restoration devices," Lin explained, lowering her voice further. "He was working on biological adaptation technology, ways for Lunari to survive in Earth's atmosphere without protection. The military implications were significant."
"And they think his daughter carries this research?"
"It would be consistent with Lunari practices. Their scientific caste often uses biological memory encoding for their most important discoveries. Information stored within cellular structures, accessible only to those with the right genetic key." Marcus processed this information, thinking of Nera's unusual abilities with bioluminescence and energy manipulation. She's just a child. A child who could change the balance of power if what she carries falls into the wrong hands. Lin replied grimly. "Either side." "I don't care about politics or power balances," Marcus stated firmly. "I care about keeping her safe." Lin studied him for a long moment before nodding. "There might be a way. The humanitarian underground has a transport leaving in 2 days. Medical supplies to the outer colonies, including Sarah Prime. But getting her to the departure point will be nearly impossible with the current security measures." We'll find a way, Marcus insisted. What do you need from me? Credentials that will pass inspection, for starters, and a distraction large enough to divert ACU resources from the departure area. Lynn reached into her desk, retrieving a small medical injector. This contains nanites that will temporarily mask her most distinctive Lunari features: skin luminescence, eye shape. It won't fool a bioscan, but it will help with visual identification. Marcus accepted the injector gratefully. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Lynn warned. The success rate for these transports is less than 60%. And if you're caught... She left the consequence unspoken. I understand the risks. I hope you do. Lynn scribbled coordinates on a scrap of paper. Be at this location at Oro 200 hours in 2 days. One person will meet you. Passcode is Renewal Brings Light to Darkness. Bring only what you can carry in one small pack. As Marcus turned to leave, Lynn added, Why are you doing this, Marcus? You've always followed rules. Kept your head down. Why risk everything now? The question echoed Nara's from the night before, yet somehow demanded a different answer. Because when she looked up at me and asked if I would be her father, I couldn't walk away, he admitted. Some choices define who we are. This is mine. Lynn's expression softened slightly. Then I hope you both survive it. With the information secured and the generator repaired, Marcus completed his shift under the watchful eyes of Zone Security. Every passing drone, every random ID check heightened his awareness of the precarious situation. By late afternoon, as he prepared to return to the hidden tunnel, a commotion near the zone's central plaza caught his attention. A crowd had gathered around a public view screen where Lieutenant Kovas, the ACU commander, was making an announcement. Confirmed, the unregistered entity possesses biological capabilities that may pose significant health risks to the zone population. All residents are required to report any unusual illumination or energy fluctuations immediately. A quarantine protocol will be implemented starting at 2200 hours tonight. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Quarantine protocol meant sealed sectors, enhanced scanning at every intersection, and drone surveillance operating at maximum capacity. Their window for movement was closing rapidly. He needed to reach Nara immediately. Changing course, Marcus headed for the nearest maintenance access point, only to find it guarded by an ACU officer. One by one, he checked alternative routes, finding each monitored or sealed. The realization dawned with chilling clarity. They were methodically cutting off all underground access routes. Someone had identified their escape path. With mounting desperation, Marcus activated his emergency communicator, broadcasting on the restricted maintenance channel. Zara, if you're monitoring, I need emergency access to the filtration tunnels. All standard entries are blocked. Long seconds passed with no response. Marcus was about to abandon the attempt when his communicator vibrated with an incoming message. North Storage Facility, Loading Bay 3, Pressure Release Valve Access, One-time opportunity, 10 minutes. Marcus moved quickly, navigating through increasingly crowded corridors as residents hurried to comply with the impending quarantine. The northern storage facility was used primarily for food distribution, making it busier than usual as people sought to secure extra rations before restrictions tightened. Loading Bay 3 was momentarily unattended as he slipped inside, locating the large pressure valve that regulated water flow to the cooling systems. As promised, the maintenance panel beside it had been unlocked. Marcus squeezed through the narrow opening, descending a ladder into darkness. The sound of rushing water guided him back toward the junction where he'd left Nara. Nara, he called softly, approaching the small alcove. No response. Heart pounding. Marcus activated his wrist light, illuminating the space. The emergency heater remained, but Nara was gone. In her place lay the emergency beacon, unused, alongside a crude drawing etched into the concrete with what appeared to be a sharp stone. The drawing depicted two figures, one larger, one smaller, alongside a symbol Marcus recognized from Lunari communication protocols: danger, pursuit. She had fled, likely believing it safer for both of them if they separated. But where would she go in an unfamiliar, hostile environment? Marcus examined the tunnel junction, noting faint blue residue along one of the passages, microscopic traces of Lunari bioluminescence. She had left him a trail. Following the nearly invisible traces, Marcus navigated deeper into the tunnel network, moving away from the populated sections of the zone toward the outer perimeter where the water filtration system connected with external reservoirs. The trail led eventually to a small maintenance room containing pumping equipment for the zone's eastern sector. Huddled between two large filtration tanks, barely visible in the shadows, was Nera. Her luminescence was dimmed to near invisibility, but her eyes reflected his wrist light as he approached. "Nera," Marcus exhaled with relief. "Why did you run?" "They came," she whispered, trembling. "Men with scanners, searching tunnels. I heard them say, 'Check the water junction.' Had to hide." Marcus crouched beside her. "You did the right thing, but we need to stay together now. The entire zone is going into quarantine lockdown soon." "Because of me," she said, guilt heavy in her voice. "Because they fear what they don't understand," Marcus corrected gently. "I've found us help. Transport off zone in 2 days." Nera's eyes widened. "To Sarah Prime?" "Eventually. Yes. But we need to survive until then." He showed her the medical injector Lynn had provided. "This will help disguise your appearance temporarily. It might sting a little." With trust that continued to humble him, Nera extended her arm. The injector hissed as it released its contents into her bloodstream. Within moments, the blue luminescence of her skin began to fade, replaced by a more human-like paleness. Her eyes, too, shifted subtly in shape, though they retained their unusual coloration. "It feels strange," Nera murmured, examining her transformed skin. "It's temporary," Marcus assured her. "Just enough to help us move through the zone if necessary." He shared the rations he'd brought, watching as Nera ate with the careful deliberation that characterized her movements. Despite the danger, despite the fear, there was something undeniably special about this child. Not just her Lunari heritage or the scientific secrets she might carry, but her resilience, her quiet courage. "We'll need to find another hiding place," Marcus said as they finished eating. "Somewhere they haven't searched yet, closer to our extraction point." Nera nodded, then hesitated. "Marcus, if we reach Sarah Prime, what will happen?" The question carried unspoken weight. What would happen to her? What would happen to them? "You'll be safe there," Marcus answered. "The humanitarian underground has connections with Lunari communities in the colony. They'll help you integrate, continue your education." "And you?" Marcus hadn't allowed himself to think that far ahead. Every decision had been focused on immediate survival, on getting Nera to safety. The future beyond that remained a fog of uncertainty. "I don't know," he admitted. "My life is here, my work." Nera looked down, her fingers tracing patterns on the dusty floor. "Will you still be my father there?" The question pierced him more deeply than he expected. In the days since finding her, Marcus had carefully avoided addressing the title she'd initially offered him. Father. A word that carried both pain and possibility. "Nera," he began gently. "Being a father it's more than just helping someone or keeping them safe. It's a lifetime commitment. It's love," she finished for him. Father explained, said real family chooses each other, even when difficult. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yes, even when difficult." "I choose you," Nera said simply. "Even if you don't choose me back yet." The straightforward declaration, delivered with a child's directness, but a wisdom beyond her years. left Marcus momentarily speechless. Before he could formulate a response, the quiet was shattered by the zone-wide alarm system activating. Attention all residents. Quarantine protocol now in effect. Remain in your current sectors until further notice. Violation of quarantine boundaries will result in immediate detention. The moment of connection broken, Marcus refocused on their immediate survival. We need to move. The pumping station near Sector F might provide shelter. It's automated, rarely checked physically. As they gathered their meager supplies, Nera placed her hand in his, a gesture of trust that felt both fragile and unbreakably strong. Whatever uncertainties the future held, whatever dangers lay between them and safety, Marcus knew with sudden clarity that he would face them all to protect the child who had chosen him. Whether he was ready to accept the title of father or not, he had already accepted the responsibility it carried. Perhaps, he realized, that was the beginning of an answer to her question. The journey through the maintenance tunnels to Sector F was arduous. Quarantine protocols had activated additional security measures, including motion sensors and periodic air quality scans designed to detect unauthorized life forms. Marcus's maintenance credentials allowed him to temporarily disable some systems, but they had to proceed with extreme caution. Nera moved with surprising agility, following Marcus's instructions precisely. The nanite disguise held, though Marcus noticed it seemed to require conscious effort from her to maintain, her natural luminescence occasionally flickering through when her concentration wavered. They reached the automated pumping station shortly before midnight, slipping through a service entrance using Marcus's override codes. The facility hummed with the sound of machinery. Massive pumps circulating water throughout the zone's eastern sectors. The ambient noise would help mask their presence, and the constant water flow interfered with standard bioscan technology. We'll rest here tonight, Marcus decided, finding a small maintenance office above the main pump room. Tomorrow I'll need to report for my shift to avoid raising alarms. You'll stay hidden. Nera nodded, though anxiety creased her features. What if more ACU come? Marcus showed her an emergency access panel hidden behind a storage cabinet. If anyone enters, hide in here. It leads to the secondary pump controls, rarely used except during system flushes. As they settled in for the night, using maintenance coveralls as makeshift bedding, Marcus noticed Nera studying him intently. What is it? He asked. You have sad eyes, she observed. Like father before he sent me away. He knew we wouldn't meet again. The perception startled Marcus. Children often noticed what adults tried to hide, but Nera's awareness seemed particularly acute. I've lost people I love, he acknowledged. It leaves marks that don't heal quickly. The boy in the picture, Nera said. Your son... Marcus frowned. What picture? In your home. Small image by sleeping place. Boy smiling with woman. The photograph of Elias and Mira, his wife, that he kept beside his bed. He hadn't realized Nera had noticed it during her brief time in his quarters. Yes, Marcus confirmed softly. Elias and his mother, Mira. You miss them very much. It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway. Every day. Nera was quiet for a moment, then said, On to Nera. We believe those who leave still watch from stars. Father said when I look at brightest star in Earth sky, he would be there, watching over me. The simple comfort of a child's faith touched something in Marcus that had remained frozen since the bombing. Not healing the wound, but acknowledging it could exist alongside hope. That's a beautiful belief, he said. Will you tell me about your son? Nera asked. What made him happy? No one had asked Marcus about Elias in years. People avoided the topic, uncertain how to navigate his grief. Yet here was this child, facing her own profound loss, reaching out to understand his. He loved building things, Marcus began hesitantly, always taking apart my tools, trying to create new inventions. He had this idea for a hover sled made from salvaged drone parts. The memory emerged, surprisingly warm rather than painful.
He collected rocks, ordinary stones that he insisted held special powers. His room was full of them, each with its own story.
As Marcus spoke, sharing memories that had been locked away for too long, Nara listened with complete attention. Occasionally, she asked questions or offered observations that revealed her own experiences and perspective. In the quiet hours of that night, surrounded by the mechanical rhythm of the pumps, something shifted between them, a connection forming not from desperation or circumstance, but from genuine understanding and shared vulnerability. When Nara finally drifted to sleep, Marcus remained awake, his thoughts churning. The extraction point Lynn had provided was near the zone's perimeter, close to the small transport bay where supply ships arrived and departed. Getting there would mean crossing multiple quarantine checkpoints, each with enhanced security measures. Moreover, the timing was critical. The transport would wait only briefly. Longer would risk detection. If they missed it, another opportunity might not come for weeks, if at all. As the night deepened, Marcus made entries in his personal log. Day 4 with Nara. Quarantine protocols have complicated our extraction plan, but we still have options. Lynn's nanite solution is working, though its effectiveness seems to depend partly on Nara's own concentration. Her abilities continue to surprise me. She adapts quickly, understands complex concepts, observes details many adults would miss. Tonight, she asked about Elias. Strange how talking about him with her doesn't bring the usual pain. Perhaps because she approaches the subject with such genuine curiosity and empathy, without the awkward pity I've come to expect. She keeps asking if I'll be her father when we reach Sarah Prime. I still don't have a clear answer. The logical part of me knows I should help her reach safety. Then step back, let her integrate with her own kind, build a life free from the complications my presence would bring. Yet another part rebels against this logic. In just 4 days, this child has awakened something I thought died with my family, not replacing what was lost, but creating something new from the ashes. 2 identities war within me. Marcus the bereaved, clinging to grief as the last connection to those he loved, and Marcus the protector, facing forward toward an uncertain future with this remarkable child. I don't know which will prevail, but I know I will get her safely to that transport, whatever the cost. Dawn brought new challenges. Marcus needed to report for his scheduled maintenance shift to maintain the appearance of normalcy, but leaving Nara alone carried increased risks under quarantine conditions. Remember, he instructed as he prepared to leave. Stay in the hidden access panel if anyone enters. Use the emergency beacon only as a last resort. It will bring help, but might also alert ACU to your location. Nara nodded solemnly.
I will be careful. When will you return?
My shift ends at 1800 hours. I'll come directly back. Marcus hesitated, then added, Tomorrow night, we make our move to the extraction point. Fear flickered in Nara's eyes, but she squared her small shoulders with determination. I will be ready. Marcus made his way through the zone with heightened awareness. The quarantine had transformed the normally bustling settlement into a series of isolated sectors, with residents confined to their designated areas. ACU officers stood at each intersection, checking credentials and conducting random bioscans. At the maintenance hub, the atmosphere was tense. Several technicians huddled near the assignment board, voices low but urgent. Full sweep of all subsystems, one was saying. Orders came directly from Lieutenant Kovas. Waste of resources, another grumbled. One alien kid isn't worth shutting down half the zone's operations. Marcus approached cautiously, logging in at the central terminal. His supervisor Garrow noticed his arrival and gestured him over. Hale, you're reassigned today. Special detail. Marcus kept his expression neutral, despite the alarm bells ringing internally. What kind of detail? ACU wants experienced techs to check all subsurface access points, maintenance tunnels, filtration systems, Waste disposal. Looking for signs of unauthorized access. Garrow handed him a work order. You're assigned to the Eastern Sector Filtration Network. The very system where Nera was hiding. Marcus felt cold dread settle in his stomach, but maintained his composure. Any specific protocols? Standard sweep pattern. ACU officer will accompany each technician. You're partnered with Officer Tran. Garrow gestured toward a young ACU officer waiting near the exit. They're especially interested in the automated stations. Think the alien might be using them for shelter. Marcus nodded, his mind racing to formulate a plan. Warning Nera was impossible without raising suspicion. He would have to find a way to redirect the search away from her hiding place. Officer Tran was younger than most ACU personnel, his uniform still carrying the stiffness of recent issue. As they made their way toward the eastern sector, Marcus assessed his companion, looking for weaknesses or opportunities. First alien hunt? Marcus asked casually, as they passed through a checkpoint. Tran glanced at him. Surprise evident. That obvious? Most ACU veterans don't grip their scanners quite so tightly, Marcus observed with a thin smile. The young officer relaxed slightly. Transferred in last month from perimeter duty. This quarantine is my first major operation. Must be important if they're pulling in everyone. Lieutenant Kovas says this alien carries biological technology that could compromise zone security. Tran lowered his voice. Between us, I think it's more than that. The orders coming from Earth Command are Priority Alpha, usually reserved for military targets, not refugees. Marcus filed this information away. Well, maintenance tunnels are my territory. I'll make sure we conduct a thorough search. They reached the Eastern Sector Filtration Network entrance, a heavy metal door requiring both maintenance credentials and security clearance to access. As they descended into the tunnel system, Marcus deliberately led them through a complex route, ostensibly checking connection points, but actually moving away from the automated station where Nera was hidden. Shouldn't we check the pumping stations first? Tran questioned, after nearly an hour of methodical searching through peripheral tunnels. Standard procedure is to secure the outer access points before moving inward. Marcus lied smoothly. Prevents anything from slipping out while we search. The young officer seemed to accept this explanation, continuing to sweep his bioscan device across the tunnel surfaces. Marcus noticed with concern that this scanner appeared more sophisticated than the ones he'd encountered previously, likely upgraded specifically for this operation. As they worked their way through the tunnel network, Marcus deliberately triggered minor maintenance issues requiring immediate attention. A loose connection here, a pressure variance there, each diverting their path away from Nera's location. By mid-afternoon, they had covered approximately 60% of the Eastern Filtration Network without approaching the automated pumping station. Marcus was beginning to hope they might complete the shift without endangering Nera when Tran's communicator activated. All search teams, priority update, came Lieutenant Kovas's voice. Bioscan arrays have detected trace Lunari energy signatures in the Eastern Sector, automated pumping facility. All available units converge on that location immediately. Tran looked to Marcus, suddenly alert. That's where we're heading next, right? How quickly can we get there? The game had changed. Multiple ACU teams would be converging on Nera's hiding place within minutes. Direct intervention would only expose Marcus as well, eliminating any chance of helping her. Fastest route is through Junction E7, Marcus replied, mind working furiously. But there's a more thorough approach through the secondary control room that would prevent anything from escaping the facility. Lead the way, Tran ordered, no longer the uncertain rookie but an ACU officer on high alert. Marcus guided them toward Junction E7, which would indeed provide the most direct path to the pumping station. As they approached the critical turning point, he made his move. Wait, Marcus called out, stopping suddenly. My scanner's picking up an unusual energy fluctuation from this junction box. He approached a control panel set into the tunnel wall. This regulates water pressure throughout this sector. If it's malfunctioning, Is it relevant to our search? Tran asked impatiently. Could be. Lunari can manipulate energy fields. They might have tampered with it to mask their presence. Marcus opened the panel, ostensibly examining the components. I need to stabilize this before we proceed. Pressure spike could rupture the main lines. Tran hesitated, clearly torn between the direct order to converge on the pumping station and the potential danger Marcus was describing. How long will it take? 5 minutes, Marcus promised. Maybe less. As Tran reluctantly agreed, Marcus began working on the junction box, carefully manipulating specific components. What appeared to be routine maintenance was actually a precisely calculated sabotage. With a few strategic adjustments, he triggered a cascade failure in the pressure regulation system. Immediately, warning lights flashed throughout the tunnel, and a klaxon began blaring. The emergency containment protocol activated automatically, sealing bulkhead doors throughout the filtration network, including those leading to the pumping station. What happened? Tran demanded, alarmed. Pressure spike, Marcus shouted over the alarm. Systems implementing emergency containment. We need to evacuate this section immediately. As they hurried toward the nearest exit point, Marcus's communicator vibrated with an incoming emergency alert. All Eastern Sector filtration tunnels locked down due to critical pressure event. ACU search teams, evacuate immediately and regroup at Checkpoint Alpha. The diversion had worked, at least temporarily. The containment protocol would keep the tunnels sealed for a minimum of 2 hours, while automatic systems worked to stabilize pressure levels. This would prevent the ACU teams from reaching Nera, but it also meant Marcus couldn't return to her until the system reset. He could only hope she would remain hidden in the access panel, as instructed, away from the bioscan arrays that had detected her presence, and that she would understand his absence was not abandonment. By the time Marcus was released from his shift, after extensive questioning about the pressure failure, evening had fallen over Zone 7. The extraction was scheduled for 0200 hours, less than 8 hours away, and he still needed to reach Nera and traverse the zone to the rendezvous point. With ACU teams regrouping for another attempt at searching the pumping station, Marcus knew returning through standard access points would be impossible. He needed another way in. The solution came from an unexpected source. As he left the maintenance hub, Zara Kellen intercepted him, falling into step beside him. "Don't react," she murmured. "You caused quite a disruption today." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Equipment malfunction. Happens in aging infrastructure." "Of course," Zara replied, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. Purely coincidental that it prevented an ACU sweep of the exact area they were targeting. When Marcus remained silent, she continued. "The eastern reservoir intake has an external access point outside the quarantine perimeter. Maintenance code 7729 will override the security lock. It's not monitored by ACU, considered too exposed to be a viable escape route." Before Marcus could respond, Zara slipped something into his pocket. "The girl will need this for the final checkpoints tomorrow. It's the best we could manage on short notice." With that, she turned down a different corridor, disappearing into the evening crowd of workers returning to their quarters. Marcus waited until he was alone before examining what Zara had given him. A zone identification chip with embedded biosignature data. A forgery, and an exceptionally good one by the looks of it. The humanitarian underground's resources were more substantial than he'd realized. Following Zara's information, Marcus made his way to the zone's eastern boundary, where the massive water reservoirs connected to the external watershed. Security was indeed minimal here. The combination of toxic external atmosphere and the reservoir's depth made it an unlikely escape route. Using the maintenance code, Marcus accessed the external intake monitoring station, a small platform extending over the reservoir where technicians could check water quality and flow rates. From there, a narrow maintenance ladder descended alongside the massive intake pipe, eventually connecting with the filtration tunnels below. The climb was treacherous, made worse by poor lighting and the constant spray of water creating slippery surfaces. By the time Marcus reached the tunnel junction, his uniform was soaked and his muscles ached from the strain. Navigating through the now quiet filtration system, he approached the pumping station with extreme caution. ACU might have left monitoring devices behind after their aborted search. The facility appeared deserted when he entered, the pumps continuing their relentless rhythm without human oversight. Marcus moved quickly to the maintenance office where he'd left Nera. "Nera?" he called softly, approaching the hidden access panel. "It's Marcus." No response came. With growing concern, he opened the panel, revealing the empty space beyond. Nera was gone. A momentary panic threatened to overwhelm him before his training reasserted itself. Think logically. She wouldn't have left willingly. She would have followed his instructions to hide if threatened. Marcus examined the office carefully, looking for signs of struggle or forced removal. Finding none, he expanded his search to the surrounding areas of the pumping station. A faint blue smudge on a lower-level access door caught his attention. The same bioluminescent trace Nera had left previously. Following this marker, Marcus descended deeper into the facility, into areas rarely accessed, except during major overhauls. The trail led to a small equipment room containing spare pump components. At first glance, it appeared empty, but Marcus noticed a slight shimmer in the air near the back wall, almost like heat distortion, but more structured. "Nera," he called softly. "It's safe now. You can come out." The shimmer intensified, then coalesced into a translucent bubble of blue-tinged energy. As it dissipated, Nera appeared, huddled between storage crates, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. "Marcus!" she exclaimed, rushing toward him. He caught her in his arms, surprised by the intensity of his own relief. "You're safe. I was worried when I couldn't find you." "ACU came," she explained, trembling slightly. "Many soldiers with scanners. When alarms started, they left. But one stayed behind, watching. I used Father's technique, bioluminescent displacement field. Makes light bend around me, but uses much energy." Indeed. Marcus could see the strain in her features. The nanite disguise had partially failed, allowing her natural blue luminescence to show through in patches. "You did exactly right," he assured her. "But we need to move now. Our transport leaves in 6 hours, and we have to cross the zone to reach it." As Nera nodded, Marcus removed the identification chip Zara had provided. "This will help us get through checkpoints. It contains biosignature data that should mask your Lunari readings on standard scanners." Hope flickered in Nera's eyes. "We're really leaving?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "Tonight." As they prepared to depart the relative safety of the pumping station, Marcus knew the most dangerous part of their journey still lay ahead. The quarantine had divided the zone into strictly controlled sectors, each requiring authorization to pass through. Between their current location and the extraction point lay 4 such checkpoints, each potentially fatal to their escape plan. With the identification chip secured to Nera's wrist and her nanite disguise refreshed as much as possible, they moved into the main corridors of Zone 7. Marcus had plotted their route carefully, utilizing service passages where possible and timing their movements to coincide with shift changes when checkpoint security might be momentarily distracted. Nera walked beside him, her hand in his, trying to project the casual demeanor of a zone resident rather than a hunted fugitive. The transformation was remarkable, from certain angles, in the dim corridor lighting. She could almost pass for a human child, with unusual coloring. The first checkpoint separated the eastern residential sector from the central hub. A single ACU officer monitored the passage, scanning identification chips and conducting occasional bioscans of those passing through. Marcus approached confidently, presenting his maintenance credentials. "Returning to quarters with my ward," he explained to the officer. Emergency placement from family services. The officer barely glanced at Nara, running a cursory scan over both their identification chips before waving them through. Marcus suppressed his relief, maintaining his purposeful stride until they were well past the checkpoint. "First one down," he murmured to Nara as they continued through the central hub. "3 more to go." The second checkpoint proved equally uneventful. The late hour working in their favor as staff, changes reduced security presence. As they approached the third checkpoint, however, Marcus noticed increased activity, multiple ACU officers, more sophisticated scanning equipment, and a queue of residents waiting for processing. "Something's wrong," he whispered to Nara. "They've enhanced security here." A public announcement confirmed his suspicion. "Attention all residents. Due to continued biosecurity concerns, enhanced scanning protocols are now in effect at all sector boundaries. Please cooperate fully with ACU personnel." Marcus surveyed their surroundings, looking for alternatives. Doubling back would raise suspicion, and they couldn't afford to miss their extraction window. They would have to proceed and hope Zara's identification chip would withstand the enhanced scrutiny. As they joined the queue, Marcus felt Nara's hand tighten in his. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Focus on maintaining the nanite disguise," he instructed quietly. "Remember what we practiced. Picture the energy contained, controlled." The line moved slowly, each resident subjected to a thorough bioscan and questioning. When they finally reached the checkpoint, Marcus presented their credentials to a stern-faced officer. "Purpose for crossing sectors?" the officer demanded. "Maintenance assignment," Marcus replied. "Pressure regulation systems in the western sector require adjustment following today's malfunction." The officer examined his credentials. No maintenance personnel were scheduled for cross-sector work during quarantine. "Emergency authorization," Marcus countered smoothly. "Code Alpha 73. You can verify with Supervisor Garrow." While the officer hesitated, another approached with a handheld scanner, more advanced than those Marcus had seen previously. Nara stiffened beside him. "Standard procedure," the second officer explained, activating the device. "Won't take but a moment." As the scanner passed over Nara, Marcus held his breath. For a heartbeat, the device hesitated, its readings fluctuating. Then, mercifully, it beeped in confirmation and moved on. The first officer, apparently satisfied with Marcus's explanation, returned their identification chips. "Proceed directly to your assignment location. No unauthorized detours." "Understood," Marcus nodded, guiding Nara through the checkpoint. Once clear, they ducked into a side corridor to regroup. Nara was visibly strained, her disguise flickering at the edges. "You did brilliantly," Marcus encouraged her. "Just one more checkpoint, then we're at the extraction point." "The scanner almost saw me," Nara whispered. "I felt it, searching deeper." "But it didn't find you," Marcus reminded her. "Your control is stronger than their technology." This seemed to restore some of her confidence. With the final checkpoint still ahead, they continued through the western sector, approaching the perimeter zone where supply transports docked. Here, security would be at its most stringent, the final barrier between the zone and the outside world. As they neared the checkpoint, Marcus checked the time. 01:45 hours. They were cutting it close. The perimeter checkpoint was heavily fortified, multiple ACU officers, drone surveillance, and what appeared to be military-grade scanning equipment. A direct approach seemed suicidal. Examining their surroundings, Marcus noticed a maintenance access panel near the checkpoint, one that potentially connected to the docking bay systems. It was a risk, but possibly their only option. "Change of plans," he murmured to Nara. "We're going underneath." Using his credentials, Marcus accessed the maintenance panel, helping Nara into the narrow shaft beyond. They crawled through the confined space, emerging eventually in a utility room adjacent to the docking bay. Through a small observation window, Marcus could see the transport Lynn had mentioned, a medium-sized cargo vessel being loaded with supply crates. Several figures moved efficiently around it, their movements suggesting the practiced coordination of the humanitarian underground, rather than standard zone personnel. "That's our ride," Marcus told Nera. "But we still need to cross the docking bay without being detected." The open space between their position and the transport offered no cover, and drone surveillance would immediately spot unauthorized movement. They needed a distraction, as if in answer to his unspoken need. The docking bay's lights suddenly flickered, then dimmed completely before emergency backups activated. In the momentary confusion, Marcus noticed a figure near the transport's entry ramp, signal briefly toward their position. "Now," Marcus urged, guiding Nera out of the utility room and across the docking bay, staying close to the shadows created by stacked cargo containers. They had covered half the distance when a shout rang out. "Movement by Section 3. Unauthorized personnel." A spotlight swung in their direction, and the whine of a drone descending filled the air. "Run!" Marcus commanded, abandoning stealth for speed. They sprinted across the open space, the transport's entry ramp now tantalizingly close. Behind them, the unmistakable sound of ACU officers in pursuit echoed through the docking bay. "Halt or we will fire!" came the authoritative command. Marcus pushed Nera ahead of him.
"Get to the ramp! Don't stop!"
As they neared the transport, the entry ramp began to rise, preparation for immediate departure. Nera leaped, catching the edge of the ramp and pulling herself aboard with surprising strength. Marcus lunged after her, but a searing pain tore through his shoulder as a stun round found its mark. He stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward, but his coordination failing. Nera screamed from the ramp, reaching toward him. "Father!" The word cut through the pain, giving Marcus a final surge of strength. With one desperate effort, he threw himself toward the rising ramp, his fingers catching the edge as his body dangled precariously. Strong hands grabbed him, the humanitarian underground operatives pulling him aboard as the ramp sealed behind him and the transport engines roared to life. "Cutting it close," remarked a woman's voice as Marcus collapsed onto the deck, pain radiating from his wounded shoulder. He looked up to see Lin Yen kneeling beside him, emergency medical kit in hand. "You came yourself," he managed through gritted teeth. "Someone needed to ensure the girl's biological stability during transport," Lin replied clinically, administering a pain suppressor. "The nanite disguise can have side effects if not properly monitored." Nera pushed through the small crowd that had gathered, her face streaked with tears as she knelt beside Marcus. "You're hurt," she whispered, placing her small hand over his wound. To Marcus's astonishment, a soft blue glow emanated from her palm, seeping into his injured flesh. The pain receded almost immediately, replaced by a warm, tingling sensation. "Bioluminescent healing," Lin observed with professional interest. "Advanced even for Lunari. Professor Yolen's research, manifested in his daughter." The transport shuddered as it broke away from the docking bay, alarms blaring in the distance as zone security responded to the unauthorized departure. But the captain's voice came over the internal communication system with reassuring confidence. "All passengers secure. Initiating atmospheric exit sequence. Estimated time to safe orbit, 12 minutes. As the reality of their escape began to sink in, Marcus turned to Nera, who remained focused on healing his wound. "You called me father," he said quietly. She met his gaze, her eyes reflecting both uncertainty and hope. Is that all right?" The question hung between them, weighted with all they had experienced together. In that moment, Marcus realized the decision had already been made, not in some dramatic declaration, but in the accumulated choices of the past 5 days. Every risk taken, every protection offered, every moment of connection had been the answer forming. "Yes," he said softly. "It's all right." Relief and joy transformed Nera's expression. The blue glow from her healing touch intensified briefly before gradually fading as she completed her work. "The wound is not fully healed," she explained, fatigue evident in her voice. "But no more pain." "That's incredible," Marcus said, examining his shoulder. Where the stun round had torn through flesh, now only a tender pink scar remained. "Thank you." Lynn finished bandaging the wound despite its partial healing. "She'll need rest now. Bioluminescent healing depletes energy reserves significantly." Indeed. Nara's eyes were already drooping, the strain of their escape and her healing effort catching up with her. Marcus gathered her into his arms, mindful of his shoulder, and followed a crew member to a small passenger compartment. As the transport continued its ascent toward orbit, Marcus settled Nara onto a narrow bunk. She fought to keep her eyes open, as if afraid he might disappear if she succumbed to sleep. "Rest now," he encouraged. "We're safe." "Will you stay?" she asked, her voice small. "I'll be right here," he promised, settling himself on the floor beside her bunk. Satisfied with this assurance, Nara finally allowed her eyes to close. Within moments, her breathing deepened into the rhythm of sleep, her luminescence dimming to a gentle glow that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Marcus watched over her, his thoughts turning to the future that now lay before them. They had escaped the zone, but their journey was far from complete. Reaching Sarah Prime would require navigating multiple transport transfers, evading Earth security protocol enforcement, and finding their way to the Lunari community there. And what then? The question that had haunted him since Nara first asked if he would be her father still lacked a complete answer. Yes, he had accepted the title. But what did that mean for a human raising a Lunari child in a colony worlds away from everything familiar? The door to the compartment slid open quietly, and Lin Yen entered, carrying a data tablet. "How is she?" Lin asked, glancing at the sleeping child. "Exhausted but stable," Marcus replied. "Her healing ability. I've never seen anything like it." Lin nodded. The biological adaptations Professor Yolan developed went far beyond what the military understood. They weren't weapons. They were survival mechanisms. Ways for Lunari to thrive in environments that would otherwise be hostile to them. Including Earth's atmosphere, Marcus realized. Exactly. Nara carries those adaptations not just as information, but as part of her physiology. She's literally the embodiment of her father's life's work. Lin, set the tablet beside Marcus. "These are your new identities and travel documentation. Memorize them before we reach the transfer point." Marcus examined the information, detailed backgrounds, fabricated histories, and travel authorizations that would get them through security checkpoints. The level of sophistication was impressive. "The humanitarian underground has more resources than I imagined. We've been preparing for situations like this since the war ended," Lin explained. "Too many people on both sides believe peace means subjugation of the other. We prefer a different interpretation." "Why help us?" Marcus asked. "You're taking enormous risks." Lin's expression softened slightly. "Because children shouldn't pay for the conflicts of their elders. And because what Nara carries, both physically and genetically, could eventually help heal the divide between our species, not widen it." She turned to leave, then paused. "The journey to Sarah Prime will take approximately 2 weeks, with 3 transfer points along the way. At each one, you'll be met by underground contacts who will guide you to the next transport. Follow their instructions precisely." "Thank you," Marcus said, "for everything." Lin's typically clinical demeanor cracked into a brief smile. "Take care of her, Marcus. She's chosen well in her father." After she departed, Marcus returned his attention to Nara, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. Despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, a strange peace settled over him, the first he had felt since losing his family. "We'll make it work," he whispered to the sleeping child. Somehow, the transport's engines shifted tone as they achieved orbit, leaving the confines of Earth and Zone 7 behind. Beyond the small viewport, stars emerged against the blackness of space, pinpoints of light offering silent witness to the beginning of their journey together. Days passed aboard the transport as they made their way to the first transfer point, a commercial shipping hub in Earth's outer orbit where cargo from various zones was consolidated for interplanetary distribution. Marcus spent the time learning everything he could about their route, memorizing their cover identities, and studying the limited information available about Sarah Prime. Nera recovered quickly from her exhaustion, her natural resilience asserting itself. With the immediate danger behind them, she began to reveal more of her personality, curious, thoughtful, and occasionally mischievous. She asked endless questions about Earth, about humans, about Marcus's life before the war. Each answer seemed to delight her, filed away in her remarkable memory. In turn, Marcus learned more about her life on Tenera, the scientific compound where she had grown up, the careful education her father had provided, the growing tensions that had eventually led to her evacuation. Through these exchanges, they began building the foundation of their new relationship, no longer defined solely by crisis and survival. The ship's crew, a mix of former zone workers and sympathetic spacers, kept their distance, respecting the privacy of their passengers. Only Lin Yen regularly checked on Nera, monitoring her biological functions and the stability of her nanite disguise. On the fifth day of their journey, as they approached the transfer hub, Lin called them to the medical bay for final preparations. "The hub security is primarily automated," she explained, adjusting settings on a medical scanner. "But there are human officers conducting random inspections. Your documentation will pass electronic verification, but visual confirmation is another matter." She turned to Nera. "We need to strengthen your disguise. The nanites I gave you in the zone were temporary. These will integrate more completely with your cellular structure." Nera looked to Marcus, seeking reassurance. He nodded encouragingly. "It's necessary for our safety." With his approval, Nera extended her arm to Lin, who administered a new injection. Unlike the previous nanites, these worked more gradually, subtly altering Nera's appearance over several hours rather than minutes. "By the time we dock, you'll appear fully human," Lin explained. "The disguise will hold indefinitely, unless deliberately deactivated." "Will it hurt her?" Marcus asked, concerned. "No, but it will suppress some of her natural abilities, including bioluminescence and healing, a necessary trade-off for safety." Nera watched with fascination as her skin slowly lost its blue undertone, adopting a more human coloration. Her eyes, too, shifted shape slightly, though they retained their unusual color. "I look like you now," she said to Marcus, studying her transformed hands. "You're still you," he assured her. "Just camouflaged." As the nanites completed their work, Lin provided their final instructions. "You'll disembark as regular passengers. Your documentation identifies you as Marcus Chen, a hydroponics specialist transferring to the outer colonies, and your daughter Nera Chen. A contact will meet you at Processing Station 3. Recognition phrase: the renewal brings light to darkness." "And you?" Marcus asked. "I continue with the transport to our medical outpost. Our paths separate here." Lin hesitated, then added, "Should you encounter any problems with Nera's physiology, there's a underground medical contact on Sarah Prime, Dr. Alara Voss. The information is encoded in your documentation." Hours later, as the transport docked at the hub, Marcus and Nera prepared to disembark. Dressed in civilian clothing provided by the underground, they could pass for any father and daughter traveling between colonies. "Remember your training," Marcus reminded Nera as they waited in the departure queue. "Let me do the talking. Act natural but quiet." Nera nodded solemnly, though excitement shone in her eyes at the prospect of seeing the hub. Despite the danger, this was her first experience of space travel that didn't involve emergency evacuation or hiding. The hub proved to be a massive structure, a central sphere with multiple docking arms extending outward like spokes. Inside, thousands of travelers and workers moved through brightly lit corridors and vast open plazas. Security drones hovered overhead, their sensors constantly scanning the crowds. Marcus guided Nera through the disembarkation process, presenting their documentation at automated checkpoints. Each successful verification brought them closer to Processing Station 3, where their underground contact awaited. They had nearly reached their destination when an alarm sounded nearby. Security officers rushed past them toward another docking arm. Over the public address system came an announcement. Security alert in Sector 7. All personnel implement Protocol Verification Alpha. Repeat. All personnel implement Protocol Verification Alpha. Marcus felt Nera tense beside him. "What's happening?" she whispered. "Stay calm," he murmured. "Keep walking normally." Ahead, security checkpoints were being enhanced, officers adding manual verification to the automated systems. Each traveler was being subjected to more intense scrutiny. Marcus scanned their surroundings, looking for alternatives. Turning back would draw attention, but proceeding meant facing enhanced security they might not pass. A soft voice spoke from beside them. "The renewal brings light to darkness." Marcus turned to see a station worker in maintenance coveralls, similar to those he had worn in Zone 7. The man didn't look at them directly, instead focusing on a control panel near their position. "Even in the deepest shadow," Marcus responded with the countersign Lynn had taught him. "Security sweep for unregistered Lunari," the contact explained quietly, still appearing to work on the panel. "ACU alerted all transit hubs after your escape. Follow me. Maintenance access will bypass the checkpoints." Without waiting for acknowledgement, the man closed the panel and began walking toward a service corridor. Marcus and Nera followed at a discreet distance, maintaining the appearance of ordinary travelers. The service corridor led them away from the main concourse into the hub's infrastructure, a familiar environment for Marcus, reminiscent of the maintenance tunnels in Zone 7. Their guide moved with practiced efficiency, leading them through a labyrinth of accessways and utility passages. "Your next transport leaves from Private Docking Bay 17, the man explained as they walked. "Corporate shuttle officially transporting agricultural specialists to the outer colonies. Captain is one of us." "How long until departure?" Marcus asked. 30 minutes. Security alert has accelerated the schedule." They emerged eventually in a smaller docking area, separated from the main hub. A sleek transport vessel waited, its boarding ramp already extended. A woman in corporate uniform stood at the foot of the ramp, checking documentation. Their guide nodded toward her. "Captain Reyes. She'll get you safely to Proxima Station. Good luck." With that, he disappeared back into the service corridors, his role in their journey complete. Captain Reyes scanned their documentation without comment, then gestured them aboard. "Quarters are on the lower deck. Keep to yourselves during transit." The corporate shuttle was luxurious compared to the utility transport they had arrived on, designed for executives and specialists rather than cargo or basic passengers. Their assigned quarters featured actual beds instead of bunks, private washing facilities, and viewport windows offering a spectacular view of the hub and space beyond. Nera pressed her face to the viewport, watching in wonder as the shuttle disengaged from the dock and maneuvered away from the hub. The massive structure diminished behind them, eventually becoming just another point of light among the stars. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Father tried to describe space to me, but—" She trailed off, emotions overtaking her. Marcus joined her at the viewport. "It is beautiful," he agreed. "Easy to forget that when you're focused on survival." "Will Sarah Prime look like Earth?" Similar in some ways, different in others," Marcus answered, recalling the information he had studied. "More ocean coverage, smaller continents. The human settlements are mostly coastal, while the Lunari communities have established themselves in the highland regions where the atmosphere is thinner." Nera considered this. Will there be other children like me? The question carried layers of meaning. Would there be other Lunari children? Other refugees? Others who had lost their parents to the war? Yes, Marcus said, hoping it was true. You won't be alone. I'm not alone now, Nera replied simply, taking his hand. I have you. The simple confidence of her statement touched Marcus deeply. Despite the complexity of their situation, the dangers still facing them, Nera had found certainty in their connection. Perhaps, he thought, he could learn from her example. The journey to Proxima Station passed without incident. The corporate shuttle's credentials and manifest raising no suspicions. Captain Reyes maintained a professional distance, but ensured their needs were met. Other passengers, actual agricultural specialists bound for various colonies, paid them little attention. Nera used the time to practice controlling her disguise, learning to maintain her human appearance while still accessing certain Lunari abilities when privacy allowed. Marcus observed these sessions with fascination, coming to understand that the nanite technology didn't simply mask her true nature, but created an interface between her Lunari biology and her outward presentation. At Proxima Station, a bustling commercial hub serving the outer colonies, they transferred to a civilian passenger vessel, bound for the Centauri system. Their new identities listed them as settlers, joining the expanding human presence on Sera Prime, part of a sustainable agriculture initiative. This transport carried hundreds of passengers, allowing Marcus and Nera to blend into the crowd. The increased anonymity brought a measure of relief after the tension of their escape and first transfer. As days passed in transit, their interactions evolved from the urgent cooperation of fugitives to the more natural rhythm of family. They established routines, shared meals, educational sessions where Marcus taught Nera about human history and culture, quiet periods where they simply enjoyed each other's company. During one such quiet evening, as they watched the stars from their cabin viewport, Nera asked the question that had lingered beneath their conversations. When we reach Sera Prime, will we stay together? Marcus turned to her, recognizing the importance of the moment. What are you asking exactly? The Lunari community will want me to live with them, Nera said, her perceptiveness surprising him once again. Because of what I am, what I carry from Father. But you are human. They might not want you. The concern had occurred to Marcus as well. The humanitarian underground's instructions mentioned delivering Nera to the Lunari settlement, but had been vague about his role afterward. What do you want? He asked. Nera's answer came without hesitation. To stay with you. You are my father now. The simplicity of her declaration contrasted with the complexity of their situation. Marcus knew the practical challenges would be significant. A human raising a Lunari child within a community that might view him with suspicion. Navigating cultural differences he barely understood. Helping Nera develop abilities he could never fully comprehend. Yet against these challenges stood the undeniable bond that had formed between them, forged in danger, strengthened through shared experiences, and now evolving into something that transcended their biological differences. Then we stay together, Marcus promised. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them as a family. Nera's smile illuminated her face, a hint of her natural luminescence briefly shimmering beneath her disguise. She leaned against his side, contentment radiating from her small form. As their vessel continued its journey toward Sera Prime, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary path that had brought them here. 5 days ago, he had been a broken man, existing rather than living, his heart walled off by grief. Now he looked toward the future with something approaching hope, not because the pain of his losses had diminished, but because he had found the courage to create space for new connections alongside it. The final leg of their journey brought them to the Centauri transfer station, where they boarded a colonial shuttle bound directly for Sera Prime. As they approached the planet, Nera pressed against the viewport, watching with wonder as the blue-green world grew larger. It looks peaceful, she observed. From orbit, It did indeed appear tranquil. Oceans covering nearly 70% of the surface. Land masses featuring a mixture of dense forests, mountain ranges, and the geometric patterns of human settlements along the coastlines. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere, heading toward the main human port city of New Harbor. As they approached, Marcus could see the distinct architecture of the colony, a blend of Earth influences and adaptations to the local environment. Solar collection towers gleamed in the sunlight, while agricultural domes created splashes of controlled green amid the natural landscape. Their landing was smooth, the shuttle touching down on a platform extending from the city's edge. As passengers began disembarking, Marcus felt a new tension build within him. This was their final transit point, the beginning of their new life together, but also potentially the most dangerous moment of their journey. Earth's authority extended to the human settlements on Sarah Prime, though with lighter enforcement than in the zones. If their identities were questioned, if the ACU had extended their search parameters to the colonies. "Are you afraid?" Nera asked, perceiving his concern. "Cautious," Marcus corrected gently. "We're almost there. Just one more checkpoint." They joined the line of disembarking passengers, presenting their documentation at the colony's entry processing. The officer, a bored-looking man more interested in completing his shift than scrutinizing newcomers, barely glanced at their credentials before waving them through. In the arrival terminal, travelers dispersed to various transportation options. Marcus scanned the crowd, looking for their final underground contact who would guide them to the Lunari settlement. A woman approached them, tall, with silver-streaked dark hair and the distinctive amber eyes of mixed heritage. "The renewal brings light to darkness," she said quietly. "Even in the deepest shadow," Marcus responded. "I'm Zara," the woman introduced herself. "But Zara Kellen was at the zone," Nera said, confused. The woman smiled. "My sister. We both work with the underground, but in different capacities. She handles extractions. I manage integrations." She gestured toward an exit. "We should go. Transport to the Highlands leaves in 30 minutes. They followed Zara to a ground vehicle waiting outside the terminal, a rugged transport designed for the uneven terrain between settlements. As they departed the human colony, Marcus watched the structured environment of New Harbor give way to the wild beauty of Sarah Prime's native ecosystem. "The Lunari settlement is called Lumen Valley," Zara explained, as they traveled. "Established 3 years ago after the peace accords granted them territory here. About 200 residents now, mostly scientists and their families who chose exile, rather than continued restrictions on Earth." "Will they welcome a human?" Marcus asked directly. Zara glanced at him in the vehicle's mirror. "They've been informed of your role in Nera's rescue. Professor Yolen was highly respected. His daughter's safety will earn you consideration." She paused. "Beyond that, depends on you both." The journey took several hours, climbing steadily into the highland region where the atmosphere thinned slightly, creating conditions more compatible with Lunari physiology. As they ascended, Nera's excitement became palpable, her disguise occasionally flickering as her control wavered. "You can deactivate the nanites when we reach the settlement," Zara told her. "No need for disguise among your own people." Nera looked to Marcus, seeking his reaction. He nodded encouragingly. "It's time to be yourself again." The transport crested a final ridge, revealing a valley nestled between towering peaks. Unlike the geometric precision of the human colony, Lumen Valley spread organically across the landscape, structures that seemed to grow from the terrain rather than impose upon it, connected by pathways that followed natural contours. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the subtle luminescence that characterized Lunari architecture, growing more visible as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "It's home," Zara said. "For both of you now, if you choose it." The transport descended into the valley, following a winding road toward the settlement's center. As they approached, figures emerged from various structures, Lunari residents coming to witness the arrival of Professor Yolan's daughter. Zara stopped the vehicle in a small plaza at the settlement's heart. A group of elders waited there, their luminescence brighter and more controlled than the younger Lunari gathering around them. "Ready?" Marcus asked Nera, who suddenly seemed hesitant despite her earlier excitement. She nodded, though uncertainty showed in her eyes. As they exited the vehicle, Nera deactivated her nanite disguise, allowing her natural Lunari appearance to emerge fully for the first time since their escape. The blue luminescence of her skin brightened, and her eyes regained their distinctive almond shape. A murmur passed through the gathered crowd as they recognized the genetic markers of the scientific caste, Professor Yolan's lineage visible in his daughter's features. The eldest of the waiting group stepped forward, a tall, dignified Lunari with silver-blue skin. "I am Elder Tavril. We welcome Era, daughter of Yolan, to Lumen Valley." His gaze shifted to Marcus. "And we acknowledge the debt owed to Marcus Hale, who risked his life to bring her safely to us." Nera, or Era as she had been named on Tenera, stepped forward. "I am honored by your welcome, Elder, but I come with a request." She reached back, taking Marcus's hand and drawing him forward. "This man is now my father. Where I live, he lives. What home welcomes me must welcome him also." The directness of her declaration created another ripple through the assembled Lunari. Elder Tavril studied them both, his expression unreadable. "Yolan entrusted his greatest creation to a human's protection," he observed. "Perhaps there is wisdom in continuing that trust." He extended his hands, palms up in the traditional Lunari gesture of acceptance. "Marcus Hale, Lumen Valley offers you residence alongside your daughter. The path will not be simple, but it is open to you both." Relief washed through Marcus. The first hurdle cleared, though many certainly remained ahead. Nera squeezed his hand, her joy luminous, both literally and figuratively. They were led to a dwelling at the settlement's edge, a structure that seemed to balance between Lunari architectural preferences and human needs. Inside, the space was divided into areas that could accommodate both Nera's requirement for thinner atmosphere and Marcus's need for Earth-standard conditions. "The humanitarian underground informed us of your coming," Elder Tavril explained. "This dwelling was prepared to serve you both." As evening fell over Lumen Valley, Marcus stood at the dwelling's threshold, watching as the settlement's natural luminescence strengthened against the gathering darkness. Beside him, Nera, now free to express her true nature, practiced creating small patterns of light between her fingers, her control improving with each attempt. "Do you think we made the right choice?" she asked, her concentration never wavering from the dancing lights. Marcus considered the question, thinking of the path that had brought them here, from a chance encounter in an abandoned medical wing to a new beginning on a distant world. He thought of his son and wife, never to be forgotten but no longer the boundary of his capacity for connection. He thought of the challenges ahead, cultural differences to navigate, abilities to nurture that he could never fully understand, a community to integrate with despite being fundamentally different. "Yes," he answered finally. "We made the right choice." Nera smiled, releasing her light pattern to drift upward like a constellation of tiny stars. "Father would be happy. He said finding the right person was more important than finding the right place." "Your father was a wise man," Marcus said. "I wish I could have known him." "You would have liked each other," Nera declared with a child's certainty. As night settled fully over Lumen Valley, the settlement's bioluminescence created a landscape of soft blue light against the darkness. Stars emerged above, more brilliant than they had ever appeared from Earth's polluted atmosphere. Marcus felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. Not completion. There would always be grief for what he had lost, challenges in what lay ahead, but a kind of harmony between past and future, loss and discovery. Nera leaned against him, her natural luminescence pulsing gently with her heartbeat. "Will you tell me a story?" she asked. "Like you used to tell your son?" Marcus smiled, leading her inside their new home. "Once," he began, "there was a brave explorer who traveled between the stars, searching for a place called home. But what he discovered was that home isn't a place at all." As he continued the story, Nara's eyes shone with the same wonder that had been in them when she'd first looked up at him in that abandoned corridor and whispered, "Will you be my father?" A question that had changed everything. A question he could no longer imagine having answered any other way. Outside their dwelling, the purple-pink twilight of Sarah Prime gave way to deep night, stars illuminating the promise of tomorrow. Within, father and daughter, bound not by blood but by choice, began writing the next chapter of their story together.